Sometimes we don't know someone as well as we think that we might. Sometimes we think that we know someone really well only to realize that we don't actually know them as well as we thought we did. Or there's things that we knew but we didn't really focus on or remember because we didn't really think that they were that big of a deal. When you're dating someone, I heard this a lot when I was dating, that you don't really know someone while you're dating, you really get to know them when you get married. Right? And not that they're keeping anything from you, but when you're married and you're living with someone, you learn a lot more about them than when you're dating. And it didn't take Ashley and I long being married for her to learn a lot of new things about me. Okay, I'll give you a couple funny examples. For example, she didn't know that I set between 4 to 6 alarms every single night in perfect 2 to 3 minute increments, right? Anyone else do that? Why? She also didn't know that I'm going to hit snooze on every single one of those alarms. So I need all of them to continue to go off to wake me up. She didn't know that I was going to set my first alarm at least 20 minutes, if not more, than when I actually have to get up to allow me the time to go through hitting snooze and continuing to turn the alarms off. Best one yet, she didn't know that this was my alarm sound.
Really good. I didn't hear it.
Ashley, you didn't hear it? There it is. She didn't know. She didn't know until we got married. Because sometimes we just don't know people as well as we think we do, right? And so the question that we're asking with this series is, do you actually know who Jesus is? Do you actually know who Jesus is? Do you truly know him? Or is it possible that there are some pieces of his character that maybe we've just missed or overlooked? Maybe we've heard it or we know it, but we've often just missed it or overlooked it. We're in this Real Jesus series, and we're on this mission to discover who Jesus actually is according to how the scriptures reveal him to us. And last week we talked about how Jesus is compassionate. Right? And the big idea with last week was that Jesus' compassion knows no limits. He is compassionate for all people and all situations, and it reaches out and extends over anything that anyone can go through, right? He is compassionate. Tonight we're going to be in Mark chapter 5, but before we get into Mark chapter 5, we have to back up and we actually have to go to the end of Mark chapter 4, okay? Because it's important to understand what's going on in Mark chapter 5 and why it's so important to first understand how Mark chapter 4 ends. Tonight, it's not in the YouVersion Bible app, so if you're looking for it, it's not going to be there, so just lock in and follow along. It'll be on the screens. But Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35, it says this. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." And so they took Jesus in the boat and they started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked, "Why are you afraid? Do you have no faith?" The disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." So raise your hand if you've ever heard that story or you're familiar with that story. Okay, a lot of us, right? You've heard the story, but whether you've heard it or not, we all want to, or I want you to just wrap your head around this story and really understand what's going on. Okay, so Jesus and his disciples, they're in this boat and they're headed to the other side of the lake. The lake that they're referring to is the Sea of Galilee, and this was a popular mode of transportation, so it was busy. People would use it a lot. It was easy to get from place to place, and it was also very prone to violent storms, like we see in this story. The disciples, most of them were professional fishermen. Okay, so being on the water, that's what they did. That was their life. They knew how to be on the water. They knew how to fish. They knew how to deal with all of these different things. And so they're in the boat, they're traveling across the lake, and a fierce storm hits. right? And so picture this now. The waves are crashing in. The waves are higher in the boat. Water is starting to get inside of the boat. And these professional fishermen that are inside the boat are freaking out, and they're scared for their life. And so they frantically wake up Jesus, and Jesus immediately quiets the wind and calms the storm. And everything is peaceful and everything's okay. You guys remember a couple weeks ago when we had some pretty bad storms here? All right, there's like a couple days in a row when we were on tornado watch, and there's a lot of storms. And there was one day that it got really bad, and like really bad, and it was storming, and some tornadoes touched down pretty close to here. A few days after all this, Ashley and I are hanging out with some different friends, and we were just having a game night, and we started talking about the storms, because there's a lot of people in that friend group that really like storms. I like storms. And so we're talking about storms, and one of the people that we were with started talking about how bad the storm was the other night, and just some different things about it. And they started talking about how they went to take shelter, and they're explaining like where they went in their house to take shelter and all these different things. And then they asked us, they're like, you guys live in an apartment, right? And you're on the second floor, so like, what did you guys do to take shelter? And I was like, no, like we went to our window and started watching. Like we did not take shelter. We went and we started watching to see what was going on. And it was honestly one of the wildest storms that I've seen in a really long time. Like the rain is blowing sideways. The wind is crazy. We couldn't even see the parking lot across from our apartment because the wind and the rain was so crazy. The street signs looked like they were about to literally fly out of the ground and start flying across the sky. But you know what would have been crazier than the storm? In the midst of all of this, what would have been crazier is if in the snap of a finger it all just stopped. Right, the wind, the rain, it all just completely stopped in the blink of an eye. And the disciples, they're in the midst of this crazy storm, right? The wind is swirling, the waves are crashing into the boat, the boat is literally filling with water. And in this moment, what do you think that they were most afraid of? Drowning? Dying? What else? What do you think they were most afraid of? Sharks, right? They're scared for their life. They're scared they're going to die or something's going to happen. The boat's going to go under. Scripture actually tells us what they're most afraid of in this moment, but I think a lot of us probably missed it the first time. Verse 41, it says this: the disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. Even the wind and the waves obey him. Who is this man? And notice, if you go back to the story, notice what they called Jesus when they're freaking out and they go to wake him up. They call him teacher, right? Teacher, do you not care that we're about to die? What's significant about this is that Jesus is starting to reveal who he is, right? He's starting to show them his power and his authority. They say, who is this man that is sleeping during a storm? And we wake him up and he's probably still half asleep, but the wind and the waves obey him. And the snap of a finger, they're gone. Who is this guy, right? Like, who is this guy? It marks a major shift in the Gospel of Mark because Jesus is now starting to reveal his power. So now we get to Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 1. Okay, here we go. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And before we get too far into it, realize that this is a real story with real people, real events. Like this is a historical account of something that actually happened. This is a true story. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. And now what Mark is going to do is he's going to start describing this demon-possessed man with great detail so that we can actually understand like who he is and what's going on in this story. Okay, so he's going to make it crystal clear to us who this demon-possessed guy is and what's going on with him. Okay? Verse 3, this man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrist and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. So this dude's crazy, right? Like he is crazy. He lives in a cemetery. He has this kind of like supernatural strength where no one can do anything to stop him, right? No one can restrain his strength. No one can hold him back. No one can stop him from doing what he wants to do. He walks around howling, and it says he cuts himself with sharp stones. This dude is demon possessed. Okay, he has demons living inside of him. Verse 6, when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him and ran to meet him and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." So a legion, this was an army or military term that could mean anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 or even more. So translation, there were a lot of demons inside of this man. Like 2,000, a lot. Okay, there's a lot. Verse 10, then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." And so Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. Crazy story, right? We're going to unpack that in just a minute. But first, so I went to a private Christian school in college, right? And I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about it. Part of the reason that I loved it so much was because I went to a public high school, okay? I went to a public high school, and I saw a lot of different things, and I experienced a lot of different things as you do at a public high school, right? Many of you know what I'm talking about. A lot of things that would happen for no good reason at all, right? One of the craziest things, I'm assuming it's still like this, but one of the craziest things that would happen a lot was just the random fights that would break out, right? And I remember they would always happen at what seemed like the most random times, sometimes in the dumbest places, and there's one that still sticks in my mind to this day, okay? I still every now and then think about it because it just doesn't make any sense. I get to school, and I'm heading to class, and it's like 7 a.m., right? And I'm walking to class, and all I see is this massive swarm of people standing over here, and in the middle are two people, right? And they're squared up. Like, they're ready to fight. They're in the middle. Everyone else is surrounding them. People are hearing about this and hearing what's going on, so they kind of start walking this way. Everyone's got their phones out, videoing and recording this, and for a while, they're just kind of like sizing each other up, you know, like they do in a fight. If you're boxing or in a ring, they kind of just like walk around and they're kind of just sizing each other up, thinking about what they're going to do. And then one of them, you know, attacks and throws a punch, and then they start like wrestling and stuff. And finally, the police officer shows up what feels like 10 to 15 minutes later. It's like, where have you been this whole time? It was two girls, by the way, if that means anything. But you know that moment, right, when the two fighters are just sizing each other up and kind of deciding what they're going to do? Like, they're not fighting yet, but they're in the ring and they're getting ready. That's what we expect to happen in this story. Okay, we expect that to happen because, remember, this guy is the biggest and the strongest guy. The chains can't hold him back. The shackles can't hold him back. Like, no one can contain or resist anything that he's wanting to do. Nothing can stop him. No one can limit him. Everyone is scared of him. And when he sees Jesus from a distance coming to this place, he runs and he takes off and he goes. And so now it's like, okay, we're going to have this face-off, right? We're going to have this battle, this face-off. Here we go. They're going to size each other up. The fight is about to happen. Jesus versus a man that's possessed by 2,000 demons. Like, here we go. But instead what happens is that the demon-possessed man, he runs up to Jesus, and instead of squaring up and fighting, the man falls to his knees and he bows down to Jesus in worship. Because this man immediately knew who Jesus was and he recognized his power and his authority. He knew that he stood no chance against Jesus. 2,000 demons inside of this guy, and he stood no chance against Jesus. Like not even for half a second, right? There is no fight. They approach each other, and now this man is at the will and the mercy of Jesus. Jesus can do whatever he wants to do, and the guy knows it, right? He has surrendered the fight before it even started. And did you notice how the language changes in this story? From the first half to the second half. And in the first half, it starts talking about how no one can control or tame this man. He's so strong. He breaks shackles and breaks chains. And then by the end of the story, we see that this man is actually begging Jesus to not do something or to do something. Like three or four different times, it says that the demon-possessed man begs Jesus to do this or not to do this. He's not so strong anymore, is he? Jesus is unfazed by this situation, right? There's not a moment of panic. There was never a moment of doubt. There was never a moment where Jesus was like, okay, what do I need to do? How do I go about this? He was never worried or panicked at any point. He knew exactly what to do. We see Jesus' power and authority on display in this story. Okay, now I want to make it really practical for us what this looks like. Okay, I got three things that I'm really not going to talk much about, but I want to point them out that we see them in the story. Okay, the first is that nothing measures up against Jesus. Nothing measures up to Jesus' power or his authority. Right? These demons, they stand no chance. Nothing stands a chance against Jesus. There's no force, there's no power, there's no sin, there's no addiction, there's no struggle. There's not a single thing that can measure up to or rival against who Jesus is. Nothing can even pose a threat to him. There's not a single thing that you are currently walking through, and there's not a single thing that you will walk through in the future that can measure up or rival Jesus' power and authority. Nothing stands a chance when it's measured up against Jesus. John 16:33 says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus says, I have overcome the world. He says there will be struggles. There will be hard times. There will be things that are really difficult for us to go through or difficult for us to understand. But he also tells us that he has overcome every single one of them. He's bigger than it. He's stronger than it. It stands no chance when it's measured up against Jesus. And we have to understand this, and this is one of the biggest things that I want you to hear and remember from tonight. It's that Jesus isn't just a good man with a big heart. He is God in human flesh that holds all power and all authority. Right? Going off of last week, he is compassionate, and that is a huge piece of who Jesus is. His heart is at the core of who Jesus is. But if we stop there, then we miss who Jesus is fully. Right? He's not just a good man with a big heart that really cares about people. He's actually God in human flesh that holds all power and all authority. Here's the second thing. Jesus can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. He can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. Nothing is holding him back. There is nothing that limits him in any way, shape, or form. And we see this throughout all of the Gospels. Right? Read through one gospel and you see he wants to heal someone, he touches them and heals them. He wants to stop something, he stops it. He speaks and storms stop. He tells demons to leave and they're gone. He touches someone and they're healed. He can do whatever he wants whenever he wants to. Here's the last thing. Jesus, he holds all authority and all power. Jesus isn't just a good dude with a big heart. He is God in human flesh that holds all power and all authority. Matthew 28, verse 18. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. He holds all the power. He holds complete authority. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants, and there is not one single thing that can stop him or limit him or rival against him. Okay, I'm almost done. Does anyone know what today is? Palm Sunday, right? Palm Sunday. It marks the day when Jesus enters into Jerusalem, and it's this point where everyone is celebrating him and praising him. Right? He's riding into the town, and everyone is worshiping him and celebrating him and praising him, but he's actually entering the last few days of his life. And if we fast forward a little bit in the story, Jesus, he's arrested, and then he goes through this series of different trials and questioning. He's betrayed, he's mocked, he's flogged, he's whipped, he's beaten, and eventually he's nailed to a cross and he's crucified. Nothing measures up against Jesus. Jesus can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Jesus holds all authority and power. Right? Is that still true? It's easy for us to believe that when we read a story about him casting out these demons into this pigs, but when we read that he's beaten and he's killed and he's hung on a cross, is that still true? The answer is yes, and that's the beauty of the gospel, is that Jesus has all the power and all the authority to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, yet he chose to die a death that he did not deserve. He willingly went to the cross and took a punishment for our sins. He saved us and he gave us new life with all the power and authority in heaven and on earth, and he chose to lay down his life for you. That's the beauty of the gospel. And so here's my challenge to all of us in this room. My challenge is, let's not miss who Jesus really is. Let's not settle for a smaller version of who Jesus is. Let's respond to the real Jesus. All right, the Savior, the King, the God who holds all power. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we can respond to a message like this. But I'm going to give you 3 different ideas, okay? And what I want you to do is choose one of these that you feel like most accurately describes where your heart is at in this moment, or how you're processing this, or how you receive what we talked about tonight, okay? So I'm going to talk through them very quickly, and then I'll explain what we're going to do. But the first is worship. The first is worship, because when we recognize who Jesus is, it should lead us to worship him. Like, that should be a natural response that we have. When we recognize who Jesus is, who he actually is, then it should lead us to worship him. The second one is abide. This is a word that just means to remain. Okay, it means to stay close to stay connected, to stay with someone or something. And here's why I think this is appropriate for a lot of us, because when we combine last week the compassionate heart of Jesus, and we combine that with tonight with the power and the authority of Jesus, then it should hopefully lead us to want to get as close to Jesus as we possibly can. Like, he loves me that much, and he also holds all power and authority. Like, that's who I want to walk with, right? So it should lead us closer to him. The third is surrender. When we recognize Jesus' power and authority, it should lead us to give up our own sense of control and power over our lives and allow him to be in charge of our lives. This is one that we often wrestle with a lot, right? We want to be in charge. We want to call the shots. We want to make the decisions. But some of us tonight need to actually allow him to be Lord of our life, and allow him to be in charge, and allow him to call the shots, and allow him to direct our steps. And we could spend a lot of time digesting all of these and spending time reflecting on all of these, and we probably should. But what I want you to do is just choose one. Okay, choose the one that speaks the most to you, or that you feel like you resonate with the most, or you really just need to take a step in this area. And in just a minute, we're going to have some time to respond. There's some cards over there. There's 3 different cards. There's one card for each of these. It's clearly labeled at the top. What I want you to do is just go grab the card that goes with the one that you want to dive into a little bit more. But this response time is a little bit different than some of the response times that we have, because it's less like do A, do B, do C, write this down, put it here. And it's more of just being with Jesus. Like, it's more of just sitting in Jesus' presence. The response cards are some scripture and some questions to help you think and help you process and to move you in the right direction. But it's less about do these things, and it's more about just be in his presence. Because again, I said it last week, my goal and my hope of this series is that you just fall more and more in love with Jesus. That's what I want for all of you, is that you just fall more and more in love with Jesus. And sometimes the best response that we can have is just sitting in God's presence. Okay, and so that's what we're going to do. For some of you, it might be weird or difficult or uncomfortable, but that's good. Okay, I just ask you to lean into it. Be still. Invite God in. Read the verses and ask yourself those questions, and just be present with God in this moment.